The Trump administration vowing to restore law and order to Chicago by any means necessary following days of escalating anti-ICE protests. Those efforts now complicated after a judge blocked National Guard troops from deploying into the city to protect federal property. Joining me now for legal analysis is former Assistant U.S. Attorney Andy McCarthy. Thank you very much, Andy, for being with us. A lot of legal jargon to go through this morning, so I'll try to get your analysis for us. So this ruling yesterday, the judge is saying that the troops can go to Illinois, they can stay in Illinois, but they can't patrol or deploy to protect federal property. Can a judge do that? Because weren't they sent out under Title X?
Yeah, we're going to find out, Jackie. I think, the problem here is each of these statutes that we're dealing with in this national security area of what the president can do to tamp down on urban crime, they have objective tests in the statute for when the president can deploy. And the question comes down to, does a judge get to say, I disagree with the president's analysis of whether these objective tests have been met, like has there been an insurrection or an invasion, for example, or do the courts have to give deference to the president because he's the commander in chief, he's the one who's politically accountable to the people whose lives are at stake? And the jurisprudence kind of tells the judges you have to give deference to the president, but it doesn't say that, there's absolutely no inquiry into whether those objective predicates have been met or not. So that's, I think, what the big tension is here.
Okay. Part of the judge's refusal points to concern that the president will invoke the Insurrection Act. The vice president this morning was talking about that. This is what he said.
Well, the president's looking at all of his options. Right now, he hasn't felt he needed to, but we have to remember, why are we talking about this, Kristen? Because crime has gotten out of control in our cities, because our ICE agents, the people who are enforcing our immigration laws, have faced a 1,000% increase in violent attacks against them.
Do you see the president moving forward on this, Andy?
I do, and I think, Jackie, that, we're having a big scrap over this statute, but the president does have two reservoirs of power that he hasn't tapped yet. One is, as you pointed out, the Insurrection Act. It looks like he's got more discretion to act under that than he does under the statute that we're talking about at the moment. Also, under Article 2 of the Constitution, he has the power to protect federal personnel, federal facilities, and federal functions. So he can deploy for that reason, and he doesn't need a statute for that.
That's interesting. We've also seen on a couple of other stories some indictments over the last several days. You saw Letitia James, James Comey, and then on Friday there were some reports that came out that we could be seeing a charging document, perhaps an arrest for John Bolton as early as Monday. This was over mishandling classified material, allegedly. What's your assessment of this case? Are we going to be seeing something tomorrow?
Well, I've seen the same reporting you have. I don't have any inside knowledge of it. I understand a grand jury's been looking at this for weeks. So I imagine if we see something, it'll be more likely an indictment than a complaint, which would mean that the grand jury voted on it. What's at issue, they say, is that when they did the searches at Bolton's home and office, some classified documents were found. At least that's what the reporting is. We haven't seen them yet, but we'll have to see. But if he was retaining those documents and he didn't have authorization to do it, I would expect them to charge him.
And I want to get your thoughts also on another sort of FBI probe. You heard last week about from Republican senators who had their phone records scoured in the aftermath of January 6th. The FBI notified them. Tell me your assessment of that. Was that inappropriate? Was that a novel thing to do?
I think it's a tempest in a teapot. They got like 4 days of records. We know that Jack Smith, the special counsel, was investigating President Trump for obstruction of the congressional proceeding. What I assume they were doing was trying to find out if President Trump had had contact with people on Capitol Hill. I'd frankly be surprised if it was only 9 senators. I think that probably there were more investigation than that. But I don't think they weren't spying on the congressmen or sizing them up to prosecute them. I think they were trying to make a case on President Trump.
Is there anything to their claim, these senators, that this was inappropriate and that this came through a grand jury?
Yeah.
Is there a distinction there between this going through a grand jury versus potentially, there was a congressional investigation. Of course, they didn't do the full investigation. They just sort of, in the House went through with it. But would there have been a difference if it had come about another way?
Yeah, I would say if this had been an impeachment investigation that Congress had run, there'd be nothing objectionable about this. To the extent that you have a separation of powers issue, it's because you have the executive branch looking for evidence against a peer branch of government. So that raises some alarm bells, but they don't have immunity for everything that they do in the way of legislative action. So I actually think this is probably not a situation where they were investigating the people on Capitol Hill. I think they were trying to make the case on President Trump. He had immunity, so there's a good argument they shouldn't have been trying to make that case either.
And finally, with about 30 seconds left, you got a pretty good sense of the calendar. What are you watching for this week?
Well, I think you hit the nail on the head. The Bolton thing is the most important thing. We'll see how the Comey case unfolds and the James case unfolds, because I think they're more complicated than the indictment suggests. But all eyes are on Bolton.
All right. Andy McCarthy, thank you so much for joining us in the Sunday briefing. Really appreciate your time.
Thank you, Jackie.
Thanks.